Hey folks, welcome to the rooftop. Trevor here. Today I'm going to be brewing a Dortmunder Export beer. So this beer is, or the style rather, came from northern Germany back in the late 1800s, and this was a working class town, working class region, coal miners, things like that. And so this was the beer that they would drink at the end of a really hard day of working in the coal mines. And what this beer, the style, is in a light lager range, so it's kind of in between a Pilsner and a Munich Helles. It's a little, not quite as dry as the Pilsner, not quite as sweet as the Munich Helles, and a little more alcohol than both of those, and probably a little more hop character too than both of those. So what inspired me to want to brew this beer was I had a really great, very interesting version of this beer from a brewery called 4 Points a couple months ago, and their version was actually certainly within that alcohol range of like 4 to 6%. I want to say it was like 5.5, and they were really pushing the color on this when it was almost like an orange, probably more like a SRM of 7 to 9 versus the 4 to 6 that this style typically would see. So as usual, I've done some research, I looked around, got a couple different recipes, and used a bunch of those to come up with my own version of what I want to do here with this beer today. So stick around and I'll show you what I put together. Okay, we are filtering water. Get things filled up. So I overshot the strike temp on this by about 20 degrees. So I had to wait for it to cool off. We're now down to 160, which is where I wanted to be to get this transfer going. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything hooked up and get this moved over. All right. Should be seeing that water come in here in a minute. There we go. So we start about 8.25 gallons of water, which is all the water we're going to need. So once this mashes for an hour, and we'll be good to go. I realized as I was mashing in that I forgot to do the water additions here. So I've already put in 3.3 milliliters of lactic acid to reduce the pH down to the right level. I'm also going to be doing 1.6 grams of gypsum. I'm going to do 1.6 grams of calcium chloride and also 3 grams of Epsom salt. I'm using brewing water as usual, and I'd already calculated it, just forgot to pull them out, and I'm going to be using the yellow dry profile for this. So let's go ahead and get these added in and get them stirred up. We're only about 5 minutes in to the mash at this point, so it should be fine. Okay, here we go. Alright, so we're right here at the end of the mash, so I'm going to go ahead and run this off. So it's about 65 degrees today, and I'm not really in a big hurry. So I actually want to try to see if I can get all the way up to the boil with the heat stick without having to use the burner. I don't know if I will or not. I may give it like an hour, and if I get there, great. If not, I'll go eject the burner. While we're waiting for the boil here, I just want to take a second to look at the color, what things are looking like at this point. So really a nice deep dark yellow, which is really what I was going for. Definitely maybe pushing the SRM a little bit for the style, but not necessarily trying to brew the style here, just trying to brew a great beer, and really like the color of what we're seeing here. Alright, so while we are waiting on the boil, let's talk about our hops. So we're going to be using Hersbrucker for this. That's the only hop we're going to be using. 3 ounces total. This is a really low alpha acid hop, so we're going to be using a whopping 2 ounces as the bittering addition at the very beginning. And then we're going to take this last ounce and we're going to do a half of it, a half ounce at 5 minutes, and then we're going to do another half ounce at flame out. Alright, so after about 30 to 45 minutes, I don't know, I didn't time it, we have boil. So go ahead and get the 60-minute addition in here. 1 ounce. 2 ounce. So about every 10 to 15 minutes, I like to come out here and stir this around a little bit, and also stir in here a little bit just to make sure the hops are getting through there, the rest of the work, and just to make sure that I've got consistent heat. And one of the things about using this heat stick is that it is really just a lot of heat right here and not necessarily a lot of heat all around like you would get from the burner underneath. So I do like to make sure that I'm stirring on a regular basis to get that all mixed around. 5-minute addition. Okay, we are at flame out, so there's our 0-minute addition. I've also got our bin filled up for cooling, so I'm going to go ahead and get everything hooked up and start cooling things off. So I did have kind of an unfortunate thing happen on this brew with the heat stick. It got really hot and melted this switch here, and probably going to have to rip this plug off and put a new one on it. I'm not really sure why that got so hot. It might be because I'm using an extension cord, but I'm going to have to do some research on that and figure out what's going on there. But something to be mindful of if you are using electric brewing, that these component parts can get hot, so you got to be careful with that. So I actually just ran about 10 gallons through the 10 gallons of water, rainwater, through the plate chiller, and got it down to about 80 before I just left this wide open. Now I'm adjusting the flow with the ball lock, or the ball valve here, and I've got it down to about 64. So I'm going to go ahead and run that into the ferment. Alright, here we go. Into the fermenter. I sanitized this a few minutes ago, right before, while it's still chilling the entire batch. And so fill this up, give it a shake for about a minute, and then we'll add the yeast. Alright, so I'm going to give this a shake for about a minute. This is kind of a nice rock here. So ended up getting a final gravity of, or an original gravity of 1055. So and about 5.5 gallons went into the fermenter. I know I'm going to lose half a gallon at the very bottom of this with the yeast and everything, and I'm going to be doing a series of lagers, so I'm probably just going to pitch one right on top of this after I get finished. And I like this Weihenstephaner strain, the Safel, or the Saflager 3470. So I'm going to be using that for the next several beers. So I'm going to shake this a little more, and get it in the fermentation chamber. Probably put it around 60, and which I know is high for a lager, but I've had good luck with doing lagers at slightly higher temperatures and gets them done faster too. So that's what I'm going to be doing with this one. Alright, so it's keg time. So what I've done is I've got my 5 gallons of sanitizer up here. I'm going to put it in this cleaned keg, and I'm actually going to oxygen before fermentation, good. Oxygen after fermentation, bad. So I want to make sure that when I keg this beer that I reduce as much as possible the amount of oxygen that the finished beer is exposed to. So I'm going to use the sanitizer to fully fill this keg with 5 gallons, and then I'm going to use CO2 to push that out back into the bucket, and that's going to basically replace all of the sanitizer with CO2 and hopefully mostly essentially eliminate the oxygen. Alright, so let's go get this full. Alright, so we got the sanitizer in there. So we're just going to put the lid on. And then we are just going to take the gas, the CO2 in, and we're going to take just a liquid ball lock, or quick disconnect ball lock, and then a picnic tap on the other end, and do that. And then we're just going to pop this into the open position, and I'm just going to let that run all the way through. And I'm going to obviously mind this. I've done this before where I walked away and came back with an empty CO2 tank. So definitely don't leave it by itself too long, but usually only takes maybe 5 or 10 minutes at tops. So we're obviously pushing CO2 in, which is pushing the sanitizer out. So what's left in here should be mostly CO2. So this is how we're going to reduce the amount of oxygen that the kegged beer gets exposed to. Alright, so we've got the Dortmunder Export coming out of the fermenter through the quick disconnect on the outside, typically the side that we would take beer out of. But in this case we want, the dip tube goes all the way down to the bottom. And so we want to reduce as much splashing as possible, so we're actually sending that through the side that goes all the way to the bottom of the keg. And then we've got the gas side coming over here, the tube attached, going into the sanitized bucket, mainly just so that we can see that the CO2 is coming out as the finished beer is coming in. Just want to do a quick update on the electrical issue that I had during that brew day. So I did end up having to replace the plug end on the heat stick. And what I found out was that if you don't use the right gauge of cord, then you run the risk of getting a lot of heat. So the cord I was using was a light duty cord. I think it was like a 16 gauge. And so I've replaced it with this heavier gauge. I think this is a 12 gauge. The lower the number, the more power you can handle. And so just a good rule of thumb now, I know that in any kind of brewing situation I'm going to be using a heavier gauge cable. So word to the wise. Alright, let's do a quick tasting here of this export beer. So color wise, it's pretty orange, right? This does look a lot like the 4 Points beer, or the 4 Points version of this Dortmunder Export beer. So for that, I'm pretty happy. I was really going for that. This is a little bit out of style, right? I didn't find this beer, but I think it looks pretty good. It's not, obviously it's not clear, but I do like the way it looks, so that's pretty exciting. Let's go on to the smell. I'm definitely getting like a sweetness from this, the aroma. I'm not getting really much from the hops that I can tell, which is not surprising. Let's give it a taste. I'm getting some nice malty sweetness and like some breadiness, kind of like a bagel, breadiness. And almost a light nuttiness, like a pistachio kind of thing. I don't know. Yeah, pretty nice. It's kind of softer than I expected. I was really hoping it to be a little bit more dry than it is. I think this is a good recipe for this beer. I think the only thing that I would really change is I would probably up the gypsum a little bit in my next go of this. This is the first time I've done this, a Dortmunder Export. So I think if I did this again, I'd probably bump up the gypsum a little bit just to really dry out that finish, because it really is a pretty soft finish, and I would love to get a little more of that. I'm getting the bready sweetness that I want from the malt. It seems really balanced. It's not overly bitter, it's not overly sweet, although it certainly is leaning toward the sweet side and certainly not on the bitter side. So maybe a little more bittering possibly, but overall I think it's a really good balanced beer. I just wish it was a little bit drier. But anyway, it was fun to brew day. It was a fun, obviously, getting up to this point. It's definitely been a fast turnaround time, I think, from brewing this beer and kegging it and then now drinking it. It's probably been 2 weeks, 2.5 to 3 weeks, which obviously this beer is going to change quite a bit as it sits in the keg and in conditions. And with a lager, arguably maybe you want it to sit around for quite a bit longer before you start drinking it. But I think this is really tasty to be drinking right now, and if I was going to make a change, I'd like to be a little bit drier. So that's it. So hope you enjoyed the video, and look forward to having folks watch the videos and join me back up here on the rooftop for the next one. Thanks.